Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon session of the 2024 Justice Center Summit. Now, I'm going to ask our presenters to turn on their cameras and come online, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Cole to begin our presentation. Enjoy the presentation, everyone.
Thank you, Davin. Hello, good people. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Lisa Cole. I'm the Director of the Office of Incident Management, and I'm proud to say I have two colleagues here with me today. Mr. Freiberg.
Hello and good afternoon. My apologies that the mute button is tricky to find. Thank you for attending, and I think we have a great presentation here regarding everything you need to know about incident reporting. And over to Stacy.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Stacy Melanson. I'm the supervising investigator of 3 Business Day Review. And I've been at the Justice Center for a little over 9 years. Prior to that, I've worked for a not-for-profit OMH agency for several years as a case manager, and I also worked overtime hours in their residential houses.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's get going. So when we talk about the Office of Incident Management for the Justice Center, we're actually talking about 4 separate units. We're actually only going to talk about 3 of them today during our presentation because our 4th, the JCQ assignment team, is an internal process. So we're going to take your valuable time today and make sure we're talking about things that you have an interaction with, and that would be our intake unit, our 3 Business Day Review unit, and the information line. So before we dive in, I really want to stop and let you know what some of our goals are here today. One of our goals is to tell you stuff that you already know. There is a sense of comfort when you hear something and you're like, yes, okay, I did know that, it didn't change, we are good. We also hope that we can tell you some new stuff that will aid in the business that you do. And maybe we'll get into some future wishes as well. So first, we're going to talk about who is reporting to the Vulnerable Persons Central Register. We are going to use an acronym here after that. We're going to refer to the Vulnerable Persons Central Register as the VPCR. And the act that created the Justice Center and the VPCR defined mandated reporters as human service professionals or custodians. Okay. So that sounds great, human service professionals and custodians, but let's take a brief moment and make sure that we understand together which each one is. So our human service professionals, they're required to report while they're acting in their official or professional capacity when they have a reasonable cause to suspect a reportable incident has occurred. So under that human service professional bucket, let's give some examples. We're talking about teachers, police officers, nurses, doctors in our hospitals. So they're required to report the same as custodians are. So custodian is a word that we use at the Justice Center quite often. We can equate that to the term staff and the titles that you have here on the screen in front of you. So custodian is the staff members that are working on programs underneath the Justice Center's jurisdiction. And what must be reported? So now we know the people that are required to report, but we paid attention during trivia and saw that just because those are the people that are required to report doesn't mean that anyone can't pick up the phone and call the VPCR. But our mandated reporters must report a reportable incident involving a vulnerable person. If you've been doing your position for a while, you may have a good understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about reportable incidents. If not, don't worry. We're going to go over that in a little bit. And vulnerable persons being individuals that are served by the programs underneath the Justice Center's jurisdiction. And we always like to make sure that everybody understands that incidents may be reportable even if the individual receiving services does not suffer actual harm. And now I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Freiberg, and he's going to give us a more in-depth look about what that intake process looks like and how it works.
All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the actual intake. This is going to be the phone call that is made to our call center, which is operates 24/7, 365 days a week, including holidays. So anytime you call, you are going to be able to speak to someone. And then those agents are going to be gathering information from the caller. And some of that information is going to be the details regarding the victim, subjects, and witnesses. Details of the incident, including the date, time, location, and description of the incident. The responsible state oversight agency, who licenses or oversees that program. Is it the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD? Is it OMH or OCFS, Office of Children and Family Services? It could be state education. And we do cover a very small section of Department of Health. And then we've got our Office of Addiction Services and Support. So those are our 6 state oversight agencies that we oversee. We are going to need the name and the address of the program or the agency of the provider. And then we're going to have to confirm that immediate protections are in place for the victim. This means that if the call that's being reported is about a physical abuse of from a staff member to an individual receiving services, we want to know that that individual who abused the person receiving services has been removed from the situation, is no longer in the house, and is no longer a threat to the victim or any other person in that residence. So we are going to be asking if there's been any immediate protections or safeguards put in place. The name, title, and contact information of others who may have the same information as you. And then any other information that may assist with the investigation or the review of the incident. All right, so what to expect when making a report? So the first thing you're going to expect is that trained representative, that call center agent, is going to obtain information. The information that they're looking for, you may not have. However, they're always going to give you an opportunity to call back and update that information once it's been obtained. All reports are taken. Each generates an incident record. And that incident record that is created is going to come with a confirmation number. And that's going to be the receipt for making the report. And if it's on the telephone through our hotline, it's going to start with 101. If you choose to submit a web form, that's going to be 301. And those numbers are very important because only original reporters can call back to update a record. So if during the call center agent is looking for, if it's a choking incident, and they're looking for the consistency of the diet, and the reporter doesn't know that, and they want to call back to update that report to say, oh yes, that individual receives a half-inch cut diet and nectar thickened liquids. Without that confirmation number, that report can't be updated. And only the original reporter can update a report. So once they have that information, our agent is going to ask some demographic information from the caller, such as their name, their date of birth, a contact phone number. All that information that we obtained on the original call, we need to check to see if, in fact, that is the original caller, because only those can update a report. Any questions? Davin, anything coming in the chat?
You have answered most of them. I just want to emphasize that, again, we have oversight over programs that are operated by one of the state agencies that Mr. Freiberg talked about, OPWDD, OMH, OASS. So operated by them, or if they're licensed by them. There are some programs that are only funded by those programs. We don't have jurisdiction over them. However, to call us, you don't need to know any of that. If you are concerned about how someone is being treated, just give us a call and we can sort out who needs to get that information. Oh, and I have a question. I knew this would come up. What if the reporter is not the person with the additional information? Shouldn't the person who actually has the additional information be the one who calls for the update?
Yeah, that would be ideal. But when that person does call and we determine that it is not the original reporter, so we will always take the opportunity to create a new report from that caller. And that report, if it is in fact the same, describing the same incident, it'll be linked to the original report, and we'll get into linking in just a little bit.
And there's also a question about people who make frequent false or unsubstantiated allegations. What are the ramifications? If it's a person receiving services, we don't do that. Is not for us to address. In fact, if it's a staff person too, we would leave that up to the service provider agency to address those issues if someone is making, frequent false allegations. But that is one of the reasons you'll hear about our 3 business day review that we have. All right, carry on. No more questions.
All right, thank you. All right. So once that call center agent has completed the report, completed the phone call, they're now going to enter all of that information into the VPCR. And then they're going to put together a narrative. It's going to be a chronological, detailed report of that call. And those can be classified as either a reportable incident or a non-reportable incident. Our reportable incidents are going to be allegations of abuse and neglect, or significant incidents, or death calls. We do receive, I believe, last year, almost 1,700 death calls were called in. And then we have non-reportable. Some of these can be a general inquiry. We could get a call on the hotline and they're asking where our Plainview office is. That is a call, and we would, transfer them and route them to the right place to get that information. Or it could be something that is outside of our jurisdiction. We don't cover that program or that provider. However, we are going to take a full report on that, and then we can take that report and send it out as a referral to a different state oversight agency. Or it could be something that just doesn't meet the requirements or the threshold to be an abuse and neglect or a significant incident. If someone is calling, saying that their coffee this morning was not hot enough, that is a valid concern and a report that we're going to take, but it is going to be a non-NYJC jurisdiction call, and we will send that out to the SOA, and then they can choose to do what they want with that once they receive it. And our significant incident classification. So each state oversight agency has unique definitions of significant incidents. And the Justice Center works to ensure classification of incidents adhere to the regulatory standards for each agency. We have our guidance documents, and we have one for each one of the state oversight agencies. And we have significant incidents that have been, we've worked with those agencies to determine what is in fact a reportable significant incident. And we have those for each one of those state oversight agencies. Some of them are kind of, across the board through all of them, but one is a significant incident for OPWDD, may not be a significant incident if it happened at an OMH provider. So we do rely on those guidance documents very carefully. and they're a great benefit to us. So when we're talking about an abuse and neglect classification, there are some things that need to be that need to be in place for that classification. So we are going to need some custodial involvement, whether that is an action or an inaction of a custodian is paramount to whether or not that'll meet an abuse and neglect classification. We may see a horrific incident of two service recipients that get into a disagreement and wind up having a fight, and they could, there could be some serious injuries from that fight, but there was no custodial involvement, so there's really no abuse and neglect classification on that. The type of incident, we've got our incident, for abuse, we have physical abuse, we have psychological abuse, sexual abuse, just to name a few. And then for neglect, we have improper supervision, we've got medical neglect, we've got boundary issues that go into that neglect category. And then whether or not there's actual harm or risk of harm to the individual receiving services. And what's important here is the risk of harm to meet that abuse and neglect classification. There doesn't necessarily need to be a diagnosis of a bruise or a fracture or anything like that. It could be the risk of those injuries occurring. And then last, we're going to get to the assignment of it. We all know that we can have abuse and neglect allegations that are investigated by the Justice Center, but we also have those that we will delegate out to the provider for investigation. So when we're determining assignment, we're going to be looking at things such as the type of incident, the type of provider. If it's a state operated program, whether it's OMH or OPWDD, those are 99% investigated by the Justice Center. And so that plays a role in it. And the overall egregiousness of the allegation. So we take into consideration those three items when we're determining whether or not it's going to be assigned to the Justice Center or the state oversight agency when it comes to an abuse and neglect. All significant incidents are in fact assigned out to the state oversight agency for investigation. So after the call is taken, the incident report is processed. We're going to do a quality assurance check. Our supervisors are going to take a double look and make sure that everything in the VPCR is correct, that all the grammar and the wording, the spelling that is in the narrative is correct, because we never know where that incident's going to go. That incident could wind up in a criminal trial that's viewed by lots of different people. We've had cases at the Justice Center that have made its way all the way to the New York State Supreme Court, and we can't be having sloppy narratives out there. So we do a great quality assurance check, and then we're going to check to see if it's linked to any other additional report, because we don't want two separate investigations going on regarding the same event. And given the size of the state and the number of investigators that we have, there is a possibility that may occur. So we are going to be checking to see that no one else is working on it and it can't be linked. All right. Lisa, what can you tell us about notifications?
I can tell you that notifications can let you know if something's linked or not. So let's get there first. So as Dave walked us through, every report is creating its own incident record. Okay. Every incident record is going to have a notification sent to the state oversight agency and through your respective processes to make sure it gets to the provider so safeguards can be put in place for the individuals receiving services, okay? We also know that events happen, like Dave was just talking about. We get multiple reports from multiple people about the same event. And if we know much about how people see things differently, we get different reports of the same event. And it could be because someone walks into the room as something was happening, and that's the perspective they saw, which they didn't see much. And when they called the VPCR, it was classified as a significant incident based upon the information that was provided. But then someone else calls in that was actually involved in the event from start to finish and has all of the critical details involved, and that hits an abuse neglect threshold. So both reports, the significant incident and the abuse neglect, even though there's the same event, they're not necessarily coming into the hotline at the same time, they're both going to get notifications sent out. But within that notification, you're going to see that one of them is closed linked. So I wanted to point out a couple of different things about the notifications. One is you're going to have incidents bundled together, linked together, like Dave was just talking about, but that doesn't mean they're always the same classification. Classification is made based upon face value, and that's based upon the details that the reporter provides for us. So you could actually have a case record assigned to you for investigation and have 8 incidents linked to it. Some are SIGs, some are nons, some are abuse neglect. That just means you have 8 different perspectives of that one event. So you're going to see that in the notifications that get sent to you. But an additional thing that you're going to see in those notifications that we're quite happy to be a part of is the investigation strategy memo. Okay? So it was a few years back, we collaborated within the Justice Center and thought of a way to help provide a tool to state oversight agencies and providers to outline what needs to happen during an investigation and what needs to be submitted when the investigation is done, and what needs to be sent back to the Justice Center if it's discovered through the course of the investigation. So these investigative strategy memos are right in the notification that you receive when that report is processed through the Office of Incident Management. Okay? They're specific based upon the type of allegation that's been being reported. All right? And again, I say we're happy to do this work on the front end because Office of Incident Management isn't investigating the cases at that level, but we are helping, and we've been able to see that in some statistics. Who doesn't love some good numbers? Since the Office of Incident Management has started sending out these strategy memos as a tool to help investigators, we've seen a 13% decrease in cases that were submitted to the Justice Center, but then needed to be sent back to the provider because there was components missing. So that's a pretty good reduction. We've also seen an 18-day improvement in the case cycle and getting those cases back to the Justice Center and closed 18 days sooner. If you have seen the strategy memo, wonderful. We hope that you find them very user-friendly. If you have not seen a strategy memo, please reach out to your state oversight agency's point of contact and ask where you can find them. Again, I want to really stress, it is a tool, it is a guide. We have no idea when we hit send on a case being created and assigned to the state oversight agency for investigation, if that investigator that got assigned the case is 20 years in the title or 20 days. We know that there is a lot of turnover. We know it's a lot to keep up with staff training, and this is a way that we've developed to help that. So again, please, if you don't already know where they are, tap your neighbor and ask where you can find them. So if the strategy memos were exciting enough, we're going to switch over to false allegations. So Dave, Stacy, and I have the honor of sitting at some roundtables that the Justice Center does with providers to ask, how are we doing? What can we do better? Yes, we're an oversight agency, but we want your feedback to make sure that we're being as efficient as possible. I'm very proud of our agency always looking to improve in this process, right? And it was the invitations to that table that let Dave, Stacy, and I know that we needed a slide on here for false allegations. We have continued to hear examples and questions and the term weaponizing the VPCR. So we're well aware, and it's an unfortunate occurrence, but we are well aware that maybe a staff member out in a program was dating another staff member and they broke up, and now to get back at them, they're going to call in the VPCR and they're going to make a report and try to get them to lose their job. It's unfortunate, but it happens. So we know that false allegations happen. And right now my example was staff making that false allegation. Okay. But we also have to balance this with the fact that all reports must be taken and processed. You see that right there on the screen. All reports taken and processed. And I need to underscore at face value. We can't have an opinion on whether we think this sounds like it might be a false allegation. We can think that. We all have provider experience in our roles here in the Office of Incident Management in some way, shape, or form. So we know that, but nevertheless, that allegation that was made is what is classified based upon the information provided. So we take that, we classify and assign as we need to based upon face value, and then what happens? You get it, and you're like, oh, this is the fourth one that we've gotten this week. This is because so-and-so and so-and-so, whatever the case may be. That so-and-so and so-and-so gets filled in by your program knowledge that we know we don't have. You do. So if you have reason to suspect that there's a false allegation being made, you have two different routes that you can take. Actually, maybe one, depending on the classification. Because if you have an abuse and neglect case, and you have reason to suspect that this is a false allegation, you can request that that incident be put through the 3 business day review process. All right. Stacy's going to walk us through that process a little bit more later, but please know that they're not shy. They'll take those questions, and you're not going to be the first one to reach out to us with some information about a false allegation being made. So if and only if it reaches the abuse neglect, you can reach out for 3 business day review process to help. Okay. We know what a false allegation can do on your resources and on the pile of paperwork that you need to complete. We do want to help. What happens if the false allegation is not an abuse and neglect and it's a significant incident? That means it's a reportable incident and work still needs to happen there. But you know, because of your program knowledge, that this is a false report or reason to suspect that this is a false report. Now, significant incidents are not eligible for the 3 business day review process. So this is when you're going to reach out to the incident review mailbox. We're going to take a little bit of time later on. As I said, Stacy's going to walk us through 3 business day review. I'm going to come back and walk you through the incident review mailbox. But those are 2 very important pieces to know when you're looking at something that's potentially a false allegation. And please understand, before I flip the slide, there's one more thing that I need to talk about when it comes to false allegations. My example was staff weaponizing the VPCR. We also have individuals receiving services that might be having a mental health crisis. And they're calling in things that you have a reason to believe is a false allegation. And we have a process for that too. But nevertheless, depending on that classification, that's where you're going to go. Excuse me one moment. As you can tell, I get very choked up when I'm talking about the extent we will go to work with you when you know that something is taking up your critical time, moving staff around, and impacting individuals receiving services when it shouldn't be. Okay. All right, so right here, forgive me, we're looking at our 2023 reports made to the Justice Center. If you were in the presentation earlier today, you saw this number. What I want to take a moment and point out is that just because we see 13,045 abuse neglect records made in 2023 doesn't mean that's how they all started. Same thing with significant incidents. That might make a little bit more sense once we get to the incident review mailbox, but I want to point out that this is where they landed and really point out that this is not where they all started. Another thing that I like to kind of make note of is when we're showing information about the Office of Incident Management and the reports being made. This is not showing you the amount of times people call back and update reports. So as Dave walked us through that updating process, if you've never updated a report, we even have a prompt on the hotline when you call that you can get into an agent and they know they're just looking to take an update. So they need your name, your identifying information, your confirmation number, and they're able to take that update quicker for you. Okay, so those updates aren't counted in these numbers. These are actual records being made in the VPCR. Okay, so every opportunity that we get, we're going to make sure that everybody has our hotline number. Dave talked about web forms a little bit. I'm going to go into them a little bit further. We also want to make sure that people know that we have a mobile app that is available for Android devices. And if you haven't already, check out our public website. We have a lot of forums, there's guidance, there's questions and answers. There's a lot of helpful information on our website. So we always want to make sure that we're telling you we've got resources, and that's where they are. And the one thing I am going to say about our website, if you can't find it, I'm going to be surprised. But our agency is always asking for things that we can share more of, improve on, build upon. So please don't be shy. All right. So some information is really worth repeating. And I know earlier we talked a little bit about the prefixes. So we're going to do it again. Here's why. I told you that I wanted to tell you a bunch of stuff that you already knew. I hope that we've done that. I hope I told you a little bit of stuff that you didn't know. And now here's the stuff that may be happening, and you're the first ones to be hearing about it. So right now, we have prefixes, right? If you call that hotline, your confirmation number is going to start with 101. If you submit the web form, you're going to start with a 301. And if you're doing a mobile app, or if someone provides us with mail, it's going to get routed to the intake unit, and an incident's going to be generated. That's going to start with a 901. And I don't know if anybody out there has ever had some, what do you call them, IT issues. When our system goes offline, we're on offline forms because we will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when the VPCR needs to be down. Those incident records start with a 901. So 101, 301, 901, that has meaning to us. It might not have any meaning to you at all. So regardless of what the prefix is for you, you're still assigned a record to investigate at whatever classification that it is. But we often get asked, what's the difference? Okay? And sometimes you're really going to know what that difference is when you look at a 101 and the narrative that Dave was talking about and all of that information that is obtained on the hotline. That narrative is going to give you the who, what, where, why, when. It's all going to be there. And if the reporter doesn't know it, it's going to say that it's unknown to the reporter so that you know that the question was asked. However, when a 301, otherwise known as a web form, comes across your desk, you're going to notice quite a difference in the narrative. And I'm here to ask if you could help us change that a little bit. We're very well aware that web form submissions may be easier for people depending on where they are in their day, in the space, for whatever the reason may be. It's an electronic submission. We're on our phones all the time now. So maybe that's easy, the easiest way for you to get through, to make your report and get that receipt for making the report to the VPCR. If you choose to go to the web form route, or if you're in a title that is responsible for training staff on reporting requirements, please take a moment and think about web forms and ensure when that web form is being submitted, it includes the who, what, where, when, and why. Okay? If we do not have enough critical details, those important details to make a classification, we're going to call the web form reporter back. Because what we don't want to do is not make the connection to get the information and then have something not classified correctly for the event that truly happened. Okay? So details absolutely matter. So on that note, I'm going to ask Davin if she's got any questions for us and see how we're doing.
Oh, yes, I do have questions for you. One that's come up frequently, comes up in every single session for every single year. I don't know how to emphasize this enough. If a staff person is alleged to have, committed an act of abuse or neglect, the Justice Center never tells a provider agency that they need to suspend or transfer the staff. That is up to the provider agency. I know that some provider agencies, PWDD makes a requirement that if, it's certain types of allegations like sexual abuse, that a person be maybe suspended or, reassigned. You should talk to the state licensing agency if you have any questions or concerns. But we leave the decision about what to do with staff up to provider agencies. That's not the Justice Center. So I just answered that for you guys, but I have one for you. Is self-injurious behavior considered to be reportable on its own?
That's not a question I'm going to answer. There's so many other factors that need to be known to answer that question. What state oversight agency do you work for? What level of injury occurred afterwards? Why was the individual able to self-harm themselves? What was the custodian doing? Was it reported timely? There are so many other factors to that I am never going to say that self-injury is reportable, okay? What I do ask is that you reach out to your state oversight agency's point of contact and talk to them about that specific topic. And then through that dialogue, you'll be able to get more of the answer that you're looking for. Because I do certainly know that you're looking for some guidelines and parameters, but in the business that I do, without all of those different details, I am unable to answer you. I hope that's helpful.
Right. So we don't have a recipe for these things. So, you want to report things to the Justice Center that, if it happened to you or someone you loved, do you want someone to look into it and take action to make sure it doesn't happen again? Because that's the end result for us. So you can give us specifics of, specific situations, but we're not going to give you specific answers on those things. Let me see. There was a question if we ever find agency neglect as a finding. If you had been in the presentation this morning, we have a category 4 finding if we're substantiating against provider agencies. That's when abuse or neglect occurred and there's not an individual staff person that we can pin it upon or that we find that did it. So it could be training, it could be lack of staffing. We would make it against the agency. There's a question about if there are guidance documents for OASAS, Office of Addiction Supports and Services, providers similar to Office of Mental Health Programs. I would check their website, but we also, as Lisa and Dave have said, we have a lot of resources on our website about things that are reportable. We had a question about how long Justice Center investigations last. They vary, but we try and bring them in under 60 days. That's our average. Here's a question for our panel. What makes an incident a non-JC incident?
Dave, do you want to take it?
Certainly, I will. Things that make an incident a non-NYJC incident, and those could be, I think I touched on it earlier, that they just don't reach a reportability threshold for abuse or neglect or significant incident, or the fact that there is, we don't cover that program. It's a program that is not under the jurisdiction or the oversight of the Justice Center or any of the state oversight agencies that we cover. So it would be a non-NYJC incident.
Can the 3 business day review be used for a family member who makes repeated false allegations or repeated calls?
As the reporter?
Yes, if it's a family member that's making repeated calls. Can a provider ask that be?
It depends. There's going to be some restrictions on what's eligible for 3 business day review, and I'm going to go over those. But yeah, we're pretty open as far as it's as long as it's not under one of those not eligible categories.
And one last question, which I'm going to also answer for people. There's a parent who asked, like, hey, I'm a parent. Who do I know? How do I contact somebody at the state oversight agency? Great question. We have an individual and family support unit here at the Justice Center, which I'm going to ask WRI or training staff to put their contact information into our chat. Any questions that you have about what you can do as a family member, you can call our individual and family support unit, and an advocate will explain your options and make referrals for you and help you along the way. All right, take it away.
Davin, if I'm not mistaken, somebody asked how long a Justice Center investigation goes on for, but what I really think I heard is, hey, does anybody know the average amount of time that it takes to call the hotline? And that I want to answer for you. And on average, we're doing this work on the hotline within 18 minutes. That's our average length of a phone call. And that's a lot of information to be getting from someone. So I've been asked that before and realized that we didn't share that information yet today. So I wanted to give you that information.
Welcome back, everyone. We'll start with 3 business day review. Just one question came in during the break about what is considered a late report. Our law says that you should report as soon as possible. We always say, we want to make sure that you report to us. Often you have internal procedures that you have to follow. Typically, we like to hear about things within 24 hours. Sometimes you may not know about it for a little while. So each incident we're going to look at when they come in and what happened and why it happened. And we may ask that as part of the investigation, but we don't have any hard and fast rules on that. But generally within 24 hours is a good rule. All right, I'm going off. Take it over.
Thank you. Okay. Our goal in 3 business day review is to enhance the classification and assignment of an incident based on documentation obtained from the provider agency. The providers that we currently participate in 3 business day review are OMH, OPWDD, OASIS, OCFS, and SED. There are several steps in our process that are highlighted here. When an incident is placed in 3 business day review queue, it is classified as abuse neglect and assigned to the Justice Center. And Investigator 1 reviews the incident as well as any linked incidents and determines what documentation will be requested. A SART consult is completed during the initial review by one of our 3BDR sexual abuse response team members for all sexual abuse or engagement allegations. An initial phone call is then made to our point of contact, or POC is what we refer to them as, to notify them that the incident is in our 3 business day review queue and that the checklist and evite will be sent soon. The checklist is then completed and sent along with the evite to upload documentation through Thomson Reuters Case Center. Our POCs have 3 business days to collect and provide us with the documentation. We do grant extensions as needed. We understand there's staffing crisis. A lot of the times there's other issues that come up with POCs. They have to be out sick. Sometimes there's other issues. POCs, as long as they're reaching out to us and asking us, letting us know that they're having difficulty maintaining that 3-day threshold, then they can, we'll grant extensions. We're fine with that. They just need to let us know ahead of time that they need extra time to get that documentation to us. Once documentation is received, it's reviewed by one of our investigator ones. If additional documentation or clarification on any of the documentation is needed, we'll follow up with the POC for that additional information. The investigator one will then complete a summary of evidence with their recommendation for classification. For our incidents involving injuries of unknown origin, we have an RN in 3 business day review, and she completes consults to ensure that all medical aspects of the allegation are reviewed for those injuries of unknown origin incidents. Once the investigator one completes their review, the incident goes to the supervisor queue for a secondary review. And we want to make sure that the recommendation is appropriate based on all the documentation that we've received. If there's no additional changes needed at that time, a final classification is made. In March of 2023, our supervisors started completing an activity in the incidents that were being downgraded to significant incidents and non-MYJCs. And this activity includes a brief rationale of why the incident was being downgraded. And this step was added to our process because providers oftentimes had questions after seeing egregious allegations being reported and going through a 3 business day review and then being downgraded to significant incidents or non-MYJCs without them having any knowledge of what we've obtained during our review that supported our change in classification. And we definitely heard and understood those concerns, which led to this step being added to our process. So this activity that we create with the rationale automatically pulls into the updated notifications that we send out at the end of our 3 business day process to notify the providers of the final classification. Thomson Reuters Case Center is our secure portal that allows points of contact, that our points of contact use to upload documentation. Users will receive an information request email from BPCR notification at justicecenter.ny.gov, which contains a submission link to upload documentation, link expiration date, username, and a temporary password for those receiving a request for the first time. Once they use it for the first time, they create their own password, and that password stays with them, until they want to change it. On the right-hand side is an example of our checklist that generates from the BPCR. There's documentation on the right-hand column of the checklist. And normally we put notes, and this example doesn't have any notes, but a lot of times my investigators are adding notes to the checklist with timeframes, extra information they're requesting, questions that they have, like specific questions. We're narrowing down documentation, so we're not getting progress notes for 2 months. We're getting progress notes. We're asking for progress notes for maybe a week time frame or surrounding when the incident occurred. So POCs aren't, wasting their time getting us documentation for, that month of progress notes. We're supposed to be requesting the least amount of documentation to accurately classify the incident. So we're not we're not taking up too much of the POC's time. We don't want them to get too much documentation and send it to us, and it saves us time in reviewing documentation as well. We created a separate checklist for each of the state oversight agencies participating in 3 business day review because we wanted to ensure that we were using accurate documentation names specific to each of those state oversight agencies. We wanted to make sure that we weren't confusing our points of contact and requesting documentation with completely different names than they were used to using. So that's why we had to develop each individual checklist for all of the different agencies that we work with. So we often get asked the question, why didn't this incident go through 3 business day review? And there are specific incidents that I wanted to go over those with you that are not eligible for 3 business day review. And they are incidents that meet the criteria to be labeled as abuse, neglect, death, and obstruction, retaliation. OCFS incidents that meet the criteria to be labeled as PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act. OCFS family type homes, OMH and OPWDD family care homes, OPWDD ICFs or intermediate care facilities, and lastly, criminal allegations where there's a potential for lost evidence. An arrest has been made or there is an active law enforcement investigation being conducted. Three business day review processes approximately 400 incidents per month. Although I believe in 2024, we've upped those numbers to the mid 400s, I feel like. So we're increasing our numbers this year. In 2023, Three Business Day Review processed 4,645 incidents. 30% of those incidents were classified as JC-led abuse neglect. 11% were classified as abuse neglect and assigned to the State Oversight Agency for investigation. 16% were classified as significant incidents, and 43% were classified as non-NYJCs. Any questions?
We have one question. Someone wanted to know, they have a hard time uploading to the Thomson Reuters site. So what should they do if that happens?
They can contact one of our investigators, whoever the investigator is that's assigned to that incident that they're trying to upload for, and we can try and help them. Sometimes it's an IT issue on their end and they might need to contact their IT, but if we can help, we're happy to do that too.
Okay. And a clarifying question for someone, who initiates the request for a 3 business day review? Is it the provider agency or the Justice Center?
Intake, when a call comes in, they classify, the supervisors upstairs will ultimately put certain cases into the 3 business day review queue.
But if a provider agency asked, could they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. Go on.
Okay. I think Lisa's next.
Okay. So we spent a lot of time talking about the street going out the door, the intake coming in, the processing through, the notifications going out. Even 3 business day review is gaining some more information, but yet it's for that processing piece to make sure that the classification is as accurate as possible after that evidence review. So what happens if an incident didn't go through 3 business day review or additional information is obtained that's going to change a classification? That's where incident review comes in. Incident review is a centralized method of contact for both internal and external stakeholders. Excuse me. So it's a shared mailbox, and it's monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by unit managers in the intake unit that have been making these classification determinations. So they're very well versed in all of our classifications and all of the criteria needed in order to hit different classification thresholds. So if you find yourself in receipt of an incident that has information that needs to be updated, here's an example. We talked about human service professionals being required to call the VPCR earlier in this presentation. It's possible that the doctor at the hospital was required to call in a report but didn't know the exact IRA that this individual lived at. or individual residential alternative, or whatever program address that they lived at. So we, at Intake, take as much information as we can, and we do quite a vigorous search in the VPCR, but there's going to be times where maybe a parent provider, the umbrella provider, was selected to make sure that that notification could go out. Once that's received by the state oversight agency, they review it, they know the individuals, they send an email back to incident review and say, okay, it's not the umbrella agency, we know that it's 123 Main Street program. And that information gets updated in the VPCR and new notifications are sent. There's also a time where we'll have reporters calling in and things are unknown. Unknown staff, slapped, Lisa Cole service recipient. Someone else gets a report that Sally Jones slapped Lisa Cole service recipient. As we talked about the importance of linking earlier, we're unable to link that because from our seats, we cannot confirm that unknown is actually Sally Jones. But once that gets sent out to the program and people start investigating it and doing that thorough job that you do, you identify, and this is not two separate reports, this is the same one. And that information comes back to incident review, and that unknown is updated, and those incidents become linked. And now you're doing one thorough investigation. Incident review may be something that you're already aware of, and it may not be. And there may be good reason why you're not. So if you have not been in contact with incident review and you have information that you think would benefit, make sure you're talking to your state oversight agency point of contact, because there are different incident management units within each state oversight agency. And they may have a process already. When you elevate to them, then they're the ones that are sending it to incident review. So just check with, again, your point of contact at your state oversight agency. Because if a provider does reach out to incident review, we're absolutely going to work with you the best that we can, but we're going to ask that your state oversight agency point of contact is at least looped into the conversation, or at least CC'd on the email before any alterations are made in the VPCR. Incident review has been a very helpful tool through the years. There are times that we've identified trends and we've offered retraining, whether that be to intake agents here on the floor or providers within the state oversight agencies. So we're always working to continue our product. We're always working to continue to build you the best foundation possible, so when we hand over that record, you can hit the ground running with your investigatory work that needs to be done.
All right. Sorry, Lisa. I actually just scanned that code that was on that previous slide, and it brings you right to the Justice Center website.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about our information line. This is that last third, that's that third unit that's under the Justice or the Office of Incident Management's umbrella. So the information line handles all calls that come in from the number listed on our public website. Also, if you've ever been to any outreach events where there's members of the Justice Center representing the JC there, and there's pamphlets, the phone number that's on those pamphlets comes back to our information line. So with that being said, they handle about 1,200 calls a month. And that might not seem like a lot, but our information line consists of 3 full-time agents as well as 1 supervisor that is also Lisa's assistant as well. So she's kind of She does double duty there. So yeah, 1,200 calls a month between 4 people, and that is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So in addition to those internal referrals, we are also connecting callers with external referrals. So if someone calls the information line and they are looking for a particular unit in OPWDD, they're going to do their best to get them to that right spot. And the information line, it was only one slide, but they do a lot of work, and they are very important for the agency itself. And now we're just going to share some contact information with us. We're of course got our VPCR hotline up here. We have the information line, as well as a couple of email addresses, one for our incident review mailbox and the other for our 3 business day review. And both of those are a shared mailbox, so a lot of different people have access to that. So we do try to respond in a timely fashion if anyone sends an email to either one of those.
I think I have one last question, but I also want to say, I think if you've been following the chat, WRI put in and said that we'll be sending out all participants a list of our supervising investigators. It includes the counties that they cover. So if you have questions about an investigation, which is not what this session covered, but you can always start with the supervising investigator. That's a good place to start if it's a Justice Center investigation. The question I had was about the incident review mailbox. Can that be used to add subjects to either a significant incident that has been called a significant incident or abuse neglect? So can it be used to add subjects for either of those?
It certainly can. If you're coming in that route with incident review and you're asking to add contacts, please provide the individual's full name and date of birth, if there's any way that you can obtain that. And that will help us make sure that we have that individual listed correctly in the VPCR. Okay?
I don't see any other questions at this point. We could give it a minute or two, but I hope that everybody found this useful. And oh, I love the thumbs up. That's great. Can you add through incident review if you are not the person who made the original report?
So you can, depending on title. Here's what I'm talking about. So we used that unknown slapped Lisa Cole example when we went through incident review. It's most likely that the state oversight agency's incident management unit is going to be the one that provides us that information. They were not the original reporter, but they have a responsibility over the investigation. So at some point in time through incident review, that original reporter idea needs to step aside, because now we're moving into investigations realm, right? And because of that, we can't be using or asking the original reporters to be utilizing incident review. And I should clarify, actually, as we said, the hotline is open for everybody. Incident review is not. Incident review is meant to be the mechanism between provider agencies and the Justice Center's Office of Incident Management. And by all means, if you get confused on whether you're supposed to go to 3BDR, you're supposed to go to intake, the folks that we work with, we're very fortunate. They're great. They're going to help you get to the place that you need to be quickly and with the right information. And they're also not going to be shy. If you send an email to incident review and they're not quite clear on what you're asking, you ever did that? Write an email and you know exactly what you said, but somebody else reads it and there's might be something missing or there's more information. They're gonna send it back and ask. They're really helpful folks. So incident review is a really mighty tool, but it's not one to be shy with. If you forget to CC your agency point of contact, for example, they're going to say, hey, can't wait to help you. Just let's add your agency point of contact, because they're ready and willing and able to help.
Okay. Another question came in. Can the agency do any investigative work while waiting for the 3 business day review to conclude?
I would refer to your agency, to administrative, to staff to, to direct you and what you can do. While we have it, in the past, we've said, it's currently owned by the Justice Center. It's under investigation by the Justice Center at that point, that it's under 3 business day review. It's abuse neglect assigned to the Justice Center. So technically, it's under our investigation at that point. So whatever your agency would direct you to do, if an investigation was assigned to the Justice Center, as far as safety concerns, anything that you would need to do regarding that, that's completely, up to your agency and whatever is directed by your agency to do that. We would never tell you what to do in that aspect. We understand safety is a priority, and so whatever you need to do regarding that is absolutely fine with us. But I would say that's up to your agency. Whatever your agency directs you to do when an incident or case is assigned to the Justice Center for investigation.
And yeah, and if 3 business days, yeah, I would say, if you can take a pause and wait for 3 days, because we may, if we're doing an investigation, we don't want to be asking people the same questions twice. So, but always ask. Don't suffer in silence. We'll answer your questions. We'll try and help troubleshoot as much as we can. We understand that there's no easy answer for these things, and each incident can be very unique, or is unique. So don't suffer in silence, and pick up the phone and let us know, or email us. There have been no other questions, so we're going to give you a few minutes back in your day, and thank you very much for joining us today. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.